Well, can you hear me? This is where it doesn't sound good. Welcome to the League of Women Voters. I have a question and answer forum. This is the state school board followed by the local school board at 7:30. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and our goal is to get people interested in voting, interested in issues, get them registered. We have registered so many people this year. If you are not registered, there is a registration form right there that you can use. And if anyone you know is not registered, grab one of these cards. They can do the QR code and they can register online. You have until October 25th in order to get a mail-in ballot, so you still have time for that. Our goal this year is to try to make sure the public is aware of all of the issues that we have, and there are some serious issues out there. So we brought the state school board here. This is also a card that you might want to pick up. It's Vote 411. If you go to vote411.org, you will put in your address and it will pull up the candidates that are running in your area. Somehow, you two were not on there this time, but I got them, I emailed them, and she should have them in by the end of the night, okay? So when you pull that up, you won't see them, but they will be there. Every other candidate is on there. Okay, how the game rolls. You get 2 minutes, the candidates get 2 minutes to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves so we get to know them. Then I'll ask questions, and the questions are screened. But anyone who wants to ask a question, go to my handy-dandy assistants back there, and they will bring them to me. You have 1.5 minutes to answer the question. We'll go for a period of time, and then at the end they'll have 2 minutes to tell you how wonderful they are and why you should be voting for them. Okay? The very first thing we're going to do is have them introduce themselves. We'll start with Rod. I do go back and forth, so we stay nonpartisan. So we'll start with Rod. He has 2 minutes. This is our timer right here. She will turn this around so you can see. It will make a noise. And then I hit you with the microphone.
Okay. All right, my name is Rod Hall. I've been to Utah since I was 10 years old. I pretty much grew up around here. I've been married to the same woman for 26 years, my beautiful wife here in the front. We have 5 children together and 2 beautiful grandbabies. I've been a youth pastor for the last 25 years and had the privilege of speaking into the lives of thousands of young people over the last 25 years. It's been our privilege and a great blessing to be able to do that. Also get a chance to serve our military as an honorary wing commander with the 388 Fighter Wing on Hill Air Force Base. And just about a year and a half ago, stepped into a position where I get to serve our police on the chapel for Salt Lake City PD. And just praying for the opportunity to be able to serve the great state of Utah and the State Board of Education.
Hi, I'm Laura Johnson, and I am originally from Florida. Grew up, born and raised in Florida, grew up in Orlando, and became a teacher in 2001, worked in public schools in Florida for several years, and then we moved to Utah in 2006, and was home with my girls for a few years, homeschooled them for a couple of years, and then went back into teaching, and started teaching in charter schools in 2008. I currently teach adult education for Ogden School District, which I love. I teach English to adults who don't speak any English, and that's a challenge, and it's super fun, and they're a lot of fun, and I really enjoy doing that. So I've taught everything from 6th grade to adults for several years, and the first question I always get is, what are you running for, and why are you involved and excited about running for school board? And the second question I always get is, what the heck is a forward party? Because I'm running as a forwardist. I'm with the Utah Forward Party. And it's more of a centrist, we're sort of centrist focused. And our goal is to find solutions based on data and facts and try to kind of take the partisanship out of it, especially since this is a school board race. It has kind of made me sad over the years to see politics become so involved in our education system. When I've had parents and teachers and friends over the years who are Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and everything in between, who just sit down and say, I just want what's best for our kids. So I'm excited to be running for school board, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for doing this tonight. think this is wonderful, and I'm so glad all of you have shown up tonight. And I'm excited to talk to you and share my ideas with you. Thanks.
One other thing I didn't mention is we are live streaming this on Facebook, and then I will put it on YouTube if my technology mind will allow me. It is on Weber County League of Women Voters, if anyone wants to tell somebody to watch it. Okay, question one, we'll start with Laura. What do you see as your role on the state school board? What do you see as your role?
I think for me, the number one role would be supporting teachers. My experience in the past as a teacher has been, I've experienced frustration in going to administrators in schools and saying, you know, we have a problem, there's something going on in the classroom, there's something happening in the hallways or with the program. And many of the times I was met with, yeah, we know there's a problem, but there's nothing we can do about it. And that is super frustrating to me as an educator. And a lot of times administrators, there seem to be so many restrictions now, and a lot of administrators seem to feel that their hands are tied and that they're limited as to what they can do about problems in the school. And to me, the school board needs to support administrators and give them the power to run their schools so that administrators can support the teachers and the teachers can teach. Because it's gotten to where I've had friends who just quit over the years. I've had teachers who retired early. I've known teachers who just started in education excited, and they get burnt out and frustrated, and they regret even majoring in education. And so I think that as a school board leader, we have to do better in supporting teachers and giving them the tools they need and the support they need to fix the problems. And I'm going to encourage more local control. I want teachers and parents and administrators to have more to say in what happens in their schools and not be so top-heavy in decision making.
I do agree with Laura on that too as well. We really want to vote for policy that empowers parents, but also supports and encourages teachers. One of the things that I've come to the realization of in the midst of all this is how much teachers really feel. I was a teacher too for 10 years in private school, but just the everyday teacher now, as we've been, we went to different conferences and opportunities where people could come in and talk to you and just show their heart. Teachers just poured it out. And, working 50, 60 hours a week and all the different things they go through, we want to make sure that teachers have a platform to be able to share what's really going on at the classroom and on the front lines. And I think those are the people we need to be talking to. So on the board, we want to make sure that we vote for policy that does just that, empowers parents, create a cohesive relationship between parents and teachers, and supports and encourages teachers as well. So that's the goal.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Rob this time. What is your opinion of the Utah Fits All Scholarship?
I support the Utah Fits All Scholarship. I know it's a very controversial thing, but I do think the money should follow the student. And I've always believed in school choice. My kids had the opportunity to be able to go to private school, then they went to charter school, then they went to public school, and 3 of my kids graduated from public school, and I've got 2 in public school now. And just to be able to have that flexibility, our state constitution talks about the fact that as a parent, the parent is the child's first teacher and is responsible for the education of their children. And so we want to make sure that if they're responsible for the education of children, we empower them to be able to educate them the way that they see fit to be able to do that. So I do support the Utah Fits All Scholarship.
Okay, Laura?
I'm always in favor of more choice for parents, and I think the Utah Fits All Scholarship can be a good program. I've been actually speaking to a lot of voters and a lot of parents about this, teachers and different people over the last few months. And one of the concerns is accountability and transparency. And there's a lot of people who are worried that some people might take advantage of the system, that money might get wasted, that kids may fall through the cracks. And that's a legitimate concern. So, like I said, I've worked in public and charter schools. I've homeschooled my kids. My kids went to private school. I mean, I've kind of had a taste of a little bit of all. And to me, when it comes to education, one size does not fit all. And we have so many different kids with so many different learning abilities and so many different issues happening. And I'm okay with the money following the child as long as we're letting taxpayers know where that money is going, and as long as we make sure that we know that kids are being educated, and that parents and schools are doing the right thing. So I think if we find that balance, I would love for it to be a very successful program, but we have to be on top of it. We have to make sure it succeeds. Because if the voucher program fails, our kids are going to fail. And that's not okay with me.
Okay, we'll start with you again, Laura. In 2023, the Utah State Board of Education voted 8-7 to include climate change in the Utah SEPT standards. Do you support this decision, and why or why not? Including climate change.
I haven't had that question before. It really makes climate change before, but I think it's kind of like a lot of the other issues that we talked about. I know we get into things like evolution versus creation, about climate change, and when we talk about science, I'm okay with presenting ideas. I'm not okay with being one-sided, so I think we have to talk about the science. I think we have to present a lot of different ideas and solutions. I'm not crazy about teachers who stand up and say, you have to believe this and you have to believe this, and if you disagree with me, you're wrong, or you can fail the class. But I think science, if it's part of science, I'm okay with talking about it. But I know that there's conflicting opinions, and I know that sometimes there's conflicting science, but I think we should discuss it, for sure. And I think kids need to know what's going on with our environment, and we need to be encouraged to take care of our environment and be responsible.
I would have to agree with her on that. As long as it's real science that's being taught, it's repeatable, improvable science, I'm okay with that. As far as if there's an agenda behind the climate change, I'm not okay with that. So I didn't, I've never really researched that. I don't know what all went into that decision that was made, but that's something I definitely like to look into and find out what was behind it, who was pushing that. That's something I'd like to dive into and check out.
Okay. What can you do to ensure board members have time to review the bills or the legislation before voting on the best way to execute them?
Well, that's definitely something that's come up many, many times with the different board members that I've had a chance to meet with. I don't think there's adequate time right now to review what needs to be reviewed before they actually come to the board to make a vote. Sometimes getting these documents that are, many, many pages of documents to look through and to understand and to know. I don't think there's adequate time. And I hope and pray that that's something that will be addressed when I do get on the board, that we can talk about. And there would be a majority that would vote and say, we need some more time. We're talking about the future of our kids. We're talking about sensitive information that's in there that maybe we didn't have a chance to dissect and really have it, really go through. I think that there's not adequate time right now for a board member to look and really understand, wholeheartedly what they're voting on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've talked to a few of the board members who they've given me glowing reviews of the staff that works at the state level board offices, and they're very helpful, and they've said positive things about how much help and information and how much research goes into it. But if there's ever, when you come up with these big decisions that have to be made, if something needs to be delayed in order to make a better decision, I'm all for that. I would rather delay a decision and make the right choice than rush into one and make the wrong one. So whatever decision or conversation that would involve, if it has to be delayed, if it needs more time, I would certainly encourage that for sure.
Okay. I hope this going back. What do you see as the state's role and the responsibility for the Utah Quetzal Scholarship? The state school board is in charge of monitoring that, charter schools and public schools. What do you see as your role? The roles for the other two are pretty clear, but what is the state school board's role in the Utah Quetzal Scholarship? What do you think?
Well, related back to what I was saying before, the accountability and the transparency, I think, is important. And I know right now for parents who are receiving the scholarship, they have to either take the RISE test at the end of the year, or they have to provide a portfolio. And if we can show growth, then I think the money should continue to follow the child. But if there's red flags, if there's a school that's not running good, legitimate organization, and they're just taking money and not actually educating the children. That sends up red flags. And I think it's our role to say, hey, we have a problem. And to me, the idea there is that it's not a gotcha scenario where we're going to go, oh, you're not doing this right, we're coming after you. It needs to be, hey, you guys, you have 30 or 50 or 100 students who are failing. They're not making progress. We're not seeing growth. That's how can we help you? So we want to support these new schools as they're coming into their programs, and we want to support homeschoolers. As I've talked to private school administrators who are so excited about this, and I think sometimes we have this image of private schools as these palaces, like the Hollywood version of private schools. There are these giant palaces and all the doctors and lawyers and their kids there, but that's not always been my experience. My experience is sometimes they're just, they're located in a shopping mall, or located in little rented out buildings, and they're just trying to provide another alternative for kids who are failing. And I think it's our role to make sure that that money is spent right and that they're doing the job.
No. Me and Laura, we really do agree on a lot of this stuff, and I will just write on everything she just said. But I do think there needs to be transparency and accountability. And there's some states that have done it really well. I think we have a lot that we can learn from some other states that have done it incredibly well. And other states, it doesn't filter through income. It's just if you sign up for it, you're going to get it. The money really does follow through. So I think we need to, as well as they do it in other states, I think that we need to purpose in Utah to do it even better. And we need to do it the best that it can possibly be done. So I think that the role of the board would be to make sure that we do that, find ways to make sure that that happens.
Okay, what strategies would you implement to prevent bullying and violence in our schools? What do you feel you should implement?
I really believe that accountability, holding students accountable for their actions is key. And I think it's a missing piece. We're getting further and further away from it. In our state, we're moving towards a place of restorative justice where we want to just give somebody a little pat, and say you carry on, and we're trying to redirect it. But I think that young people need to be held accountable for their actions in the classroom, the way that they treat teachers, the way they treat other students. And I think if we're willing to do that, we'll see a big change when it comes to bullying. Also, challenging parents. Look, we need to step in and support these administrators, support these teachers. When they deal with your child over something that they've done wrong, we can't come to the child's rescue when they know that there's something they've done wrong. We need to participate in whatever action that needs to be carried out so that we can hold the kids responsible. It'll help them in life later on, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I want to empower administrators to be able to do something when they see violence, when they see bullying happening in our schools. But I'm also, just in my experience as an educator, I also want to work on prevention, because I find a lot of these kids are so sucked into their phones, and they're sucked into their routines, and they're sucked into the things that are happening at home, and you kind of get in this routine of mediocrity and violence. And I have found that I would really want to encourage programs that get kids out in the community and have them volunteering in their community, because for instance, I took students to homeless shelters. We go to homeless shelters, and we would just decorate things for Christmas. We would clean up and do things for homeless people in the community. And to hear them sit at tables and walk around and say, how did that person end up homeless? Why is that person on drugs? What's happening? To hear them talk about and to feel that compassion and to have those conversations, it makes such a difference in the anger and the violence that we see. And we saw so many behavioral improvements just by taking preventative measures and creating compassion in these kids who don't otherwise see what's happening in their community. And I think a lot of times kids are angry and they're acting out because they think their lives, they think there's all these problems and they're angry about things happening in their lives. And then when they go out and see the world and they see what's happening around them, they develop that compassion. And it's just made such a difference. So I want accountability and I want prevention.
Recently in the legislature, they passed that you should have a guard in every school, or I don't know what they called it. How do you feel about that? What's your opinion of that particular law?
Again, I would send that back to the local schools. If you have a school that says, we have some concerns and we'd like a security guard, I I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to provide that. And if a school says, I mean, I don't love the idea of metal detectors, but if that's where we are, and if schools have concerns, now you may have other schools that say, we're fine, maybe we have parents who roam the halls, and we have, I've heard of veterans, we have veterans who come by and interact with the kids in the hallways. I would present all those ideas. Do you want veterans, do you want parents, do you want security guards, metal detectors? And whatever the local schools are saying they want, I say let them make that decision and provide them with what they think is best.
It definitely does come down to local control, but I'm not opposed to having security guards that are armed. People that are well-trained and they went through what was necessary to be able to be in the schools and be trusted by parents and gone through the specific training, whatever, not just any old person off the streets. And I love veterans, but I think they should have to go through the same training too as well if they do that. But I think the safety of our kids needs to be a top priority. Our world's not, it doesn't seem to be getting any better. It seems to be getting a whole lot worse. And so I definitely don't oppose that. I would be for that. I don't know if you guys have ever toured UMA, Utah Military Academy. They have armed guards in their halls. They're great guys, and that's just what they're there for. They're great deterrent for anybody that might have some bad ideas about criminal groups.
Okay, back to you. How do you propose that you, as a member of the state school board, would work with your local school boards? How would that happen?
Well, we've already started. I know I'm not on the school board yet, but I think that's important to engage and find out what's going on the ground level, or to engage with our superintendents too as well. But not just sit around the table and make decisions, but also be involved in our schools too as well. So that's if God opens the door for me on the state school board, that's exactly what I do. I'll engage with our local school board, find out what's going on the ground level, because when you make policy, oftentimes you don't see how it goes all the way down and affects the teacher and how it affects the classroom. I want to be involved in that whole process, so I would just do that. I would be involved in the process.
All right.
Yeah, I agree, and I have heard some complaints about how things are passed by the legislature, and then things go through the state school board, and then they go through the districts, and then they go down to school. And sometimes there's a breakdown from top to bottom. And I think it is going to be important to have more communication, not only with the districts, but talking to administrators and talking to teachers in the schools. We're going to have to constantly be vigilant about are things happening the way, we passed these things, we're working on these things, but are they happening locally the way that you want them to happen? And there's going to have to constantly be open communication between districts, schools, and the state representative, the people in the state school board.
For sure. Okay, I'm gonna dig deeper. Tell me your specific strategy for how would you do that? You want to involve the local school boards, obviously, but how would you do that? What would you do?
I just think you have to schedule meetings and sit down and you need to discuss what needs to be done. What do they need help with? Where can we contribute to where their needs are? So until you talk about that, it's really hard to know exactly what the plan would be. Sure.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Find out, what they have going on in their community, where their meetings are. I think that would require a lot of driving by us, because I don't think it's just going to be about District 3. I think it's going to be statewide. And, we have to, drive around and find out where meetings are. But it's important for us to go to where they are and to make it convenient for them, and meet them where they are and be specific. What's working, what's not working, what needs to be improved, and to be doing that every month, and to be vigilant about that.
As a state school board member, you are accountable for all educational programs in the state. How do you guarantee that students are meeting the required state standards in all of the different methods being used? Attendance, test results, grade level? How are you going to guarantee that? Because we have homeschooling, public school, private school, charter schools, micro schools. How can you guarantee that every one of those kids is going to meet grade level?
Well, 90 seconds. I think you need an apples to apples comparison. And I've given the SAGE test, I've given the RISE test, there's always another level testing. And I know you're not always going to have kids at grade level, because if you have learning disabilities, there's always going to be exceptions to that. For me, it's not always about everything has to be at grade level. It's about growth. I want to see growth. If I had a student come in at the beginning of 5th grade in the early years, third or fourth grade level, by the end of that year, there should be growth. If you have a child in homeschool or a group of kids maybe in a private or charter, public, any of the schools, and you realize there's a large group of students here who didn't make any growth, that's, like I said before, that's a red flag. And that's where you have to come in and say something is wrong. That can look like a lot of different things. That can, I mean, probably the simplest is end-of-level testing. I don't believe in adding so much bureaucracy that you weigh down our schools, and I don't want it to be a burden. But there's simple ways like testing, but also feedback from teachers and parents. And if there's a large group of teachers who's saying there's a problem, then we need to go to those teachers and talk to them about that problem. If you have administrators who are all seeing a pattern of problems, you need to go back. So between feedback from teachers and end-of-level testing, there's always a way to see growth or lack of growth.
It's good. And to say guarantee, I don't know if you can guarantee, right? But we can do our best. We can make steps forward. And when it comes to listening to teachers, I think that's key too as well. Teachers are saying a lot right now. They're saying there's too much testing. They're saying we don't have enough time to teach. They're saying all these things. And that's why I think there needs to be a platform for parents and teachers to be able to speak out, and not just speak out to be heard. And so as those solutions begin to come forward, we begin to implement those things and see Utah. I mean, Utah, when you look at it on a scale, I think we're in the top 10, in the nation. But to say that we couldn't do better is just foolish. And we can do. Sometimes we're comparing failing systems against failing systems. And I think all the ingredients are in the right place here in the state of Utah, especially coming up now, to take us to a place that we've never been before, to set the standard for what can happen across the nation. And it'll happen with us working together. It'll happen with us giving parents a voice, giving teachers a voice, and then taking those suggestions and implementing them, putting them into practice, and watching things begin to transform and change, even more so for the better in the state.
Okay, what is your opinion on the state school board's responsibility concerning banning books?
Wait, so me first? Am I first?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when it comes to banning books, it's not about banning books to me. It's about keeping sexually explicit material out of our schools. And so some of these books, and I know super controversial, the things that have come up in the news, and if you've taken time to read in the excerpts, I'm not gonna go into any details about it because there's a lot of filth involved in those things. I'm not against removing sexually explicit material from our schools. Are those books, if they want to put them in a public library and leave it to the parents' discretion to take their child down and check out one of those books, then so be it. But when it comes to school, that needs to be a haven. I really have a tender spot in my heart when it comes to pornography. Our kids, the earlier they're exposed to it, the quicker they can get addicted to that. And we deal with full-grown men that have been addicted since they were young, elementary school, that can't shake it. And so some of this will be the first exposure that they've ever had to pornography, because that's what it is. It's pornographic, some of these things. And we want to make sure that our schools are clear of that. Let's just let it be a place to teach. You know what I mean? Math and science and arithmetic, all those things are not a place to expose kids. I know that people want to create free thinkers and all these different things, but that, to me, is inappropriate, and it should be out of our schools.
Yeah, I mean, I agree when you have things that are explicit and inappropriate, but I also feel like this is one of those issues that somehow has become very partisan, and I'm not sure why, because I think there's a common sense approach to this. Books, every book that I've seen, especially in education, has grade level or age level recommendations. And if it says this book is recommended for children 16 and older, then it shouldn't be in middle school and elementary school. That's just common sense. I don't believe in banning books across the board. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, when as a teacher, I would not read Of Mice and Men to a third grade class. There's some rough language in that. It's more appropriate for later junior high or elementary, right? And we can go through book after book. There are books that, to me, it's not so much about what is the topic or the issue they're talking about. Is it grade level appropriate? So and there have been some of these controversial books that have come out, and when they talk to the author says, I put a note on there that says, this is for ages 16 and older. I don't understand why they're putting it in an elementary school. That doesn't make sense. So that's not, to me, that's not a left or a right issue. That's just a common sense issue. If it's not meant for a young age, don't put it in an elementary school. If it's meant for high school, put it in the high school. If it's meant for 18 and older, if it's for adults, don't put it in the high school. But we need to use common sense about this and make sure that books are age appropriate. We don't have to throw out every book that we disagree with and every that we don't like. And you know, we've been dealing with this since I was a kid. I remember having the same conversation about this back then.
Okay, this is a really controversial one, but here we go. If you were elected to the school board, how do you think your views on evolution would influence this topic in our schools, teaching that topic in our schools? Do you believe that that should be one of the topics that is taught?
Right. I think that, again, this is kind of going back to like what you're saying about environmentalism, about the environmental issues. I think because evolution is a theory, creation is a theory, and then there's other religions, and you know, there's all these, I think all of the ideas should be shared. I think they should all be discussed. And I don't like the idea of teaching them as fact, because nobody was there. We haven't proven any of these things as fact. They are all theories. And I think all theories and ideas should be shared. I'm not against talking about evolution as long as you balance it out with other theories.
I would agree with that. I think you teach evolution as a theory. You should teach creation. I mean, I think that kids ought to be able to have the whole picture, but as of right now, that's not the case. And so it's taught as a fact. And if I had any bearing, which I don't, on the state school board, you're not going to really be able to have a say in that as far as what the curriculum goes. Yeah, I would. I mean, if it was taught as a theory, if you taught creation and everything else like that, you know, to go along with it.
Okay, what is your opinion of the core curriculum standards that are currently in place?
What's that mean? So I think that when we embraced Common Core, it really centralized power and took a lot of it away from parents. If you read our state constitution, the parents should be involved in the process of what goes into the classroom, and they're not, because we have centralized standards. So I would love to see more of that power given back to the parents, and be involved in that process, and more taken away from the government. That's what happens when you centralize those standards. It's a lot of government standards that come into play. And so even in the state of Utah, we have a percentage that we can mess around with when it comes to Common Core, and everything else comes out from the government.
Yeah, I think Common Core should be used as a guideline. I know initially it was created so that when you have children who travel from state to state, they're learning the same thing. If they move from Montana to Utah, or from Utah to New York, there's not such a drastic difference. But I think it's a good guideline, and I think the idea behind it is good. But again, I agree with you on the fact that teachers, administrators, and parents, that's like the whole trinity of education to me, should be able to go through and look at it and say, our kids aren't ready for this, or if there's something else or something conflicting or they feel like is more important, that it can be used as a guideline. But yeah, the top-down mandate of it, I'm not a fan of that. But I like the idea that at least it's a guideline and people can see what's happening across all of the 6th grade sciences or all of the 4th grade maths. I do think it's a good guideline for that.
Civics education is not being taught in the elementary schools as it should be. It's not very thorough. How do you feel we can incorporate that into the curriculum?
As a history teacher, I think it should be in everything we do. Everything from the pledge to interacting with local. I love it when teachers take the kids to the state capitol. We actually had the charter school I worked at. They were taking 8th graders to Washington, D.C. How they managed to pull that off was amazing to me, to take a bunch of 8th graders to Washington. But yes, I am a fan. I think it should be, if you're teaching a writing class, have them write about the Constitution. If you're teaching reading, have them read about the Constitution. If you can incorporate civics into math or science, I would encourage that. But yes, I think civics and civic engagement is the absolute one of the most important things we can teach. And the fact that we haven't done it, we're seeing the effects of that now. The fact that 20% of voters are just not engaged, or they don't do their research. And sometimes politics is frustrating and overwhelming, but sometimes they feel overwhelmed because they say, I don't know how it works. I don't understand it, I don't get it, and that's sad. So yes, as a history teacher, I am all about civics. I'm all about the civics for sure.
I definitely think it needs to be from the youngest we can possibly teach them all the way through. If you talk to district every day, young person, most of our young people have no idea about our founding fathers, how this nation was really founded, what it was founded on. I don't think we need to be afraid to teach all of it. I think we need to teach the good, the bad, and the ugly, every last bit of it, so that we can learn from the things that we did, some mistakes, or not so much a mistake, the things we did that were wrong in this nation years ago, but also learn from the things that we did that were right, and continue to do those things that continue to make this country great. So I think it's vitally important that we go back to civics in our curriculum all the way back, from kindergarten up. There's no reason a young person should graduate from a school in the United States of America and hate their country. And oftentimes that happens. It's happening. It's happening all over the nation because what they do decide to teach them is just the bad things that happen, not the good, not the founding, you know. And I'm telling you the truth because we just got back from the great state of New York City, where you get a chance to see a lot of this fruit of what's happening. Kids just don't know about the history. If you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going. And so I think it's super important that we implement that into our schools.
Okay, thank you. Does the state school board have any role on the policy of cell phones in the classroom?
There's some state school board here. Is there any rule on the policy of cell phone?
Or is that only on the local level?
I don't know, guys. Did they pass that law? Jenny or
They're
Joe?
working on it right now.
They're working on it now? Okay.
What is your feeling on cell phones in school? No, it's you.
Is it me? Okay. I mean, obviously they're a huge distraction in the classroom, and I think that they should definitely not be in the classroom. Some of the biggest pushback from parents, and it's just that they want to know what's going on in the classroom. I had some people send me some pictures and stuff that was being taught in the classroom the other day that shouldn't have been there. So they're afraid they're going to lose that transparency. But I think for the most part, we should not have classrooms, cell phones in the classroom.
Again, I would defer to the schools, and I would let that holy trinity of education, I would let parents, teachers, and administrators decide. I know sometimes I've known teachers who use phones in the classroom. You know, you want to do a Kahoot game, you want to have the kids look things up, and maybe you have access to Chromebooks and maybe you don't. So my reaction with my kids was turn it off when you get to school and don't turn it on until you leave. And I would love to make that a law across the United States. But practically and realistically, I think it's smarter to let your local schools decide what their rules are going to be for each school.
Okay. When someone disagrees with you, what strategies do you utilize? Because that will happen between all of the school board members, and they're all different. What strategies would you use to get to a consensus between all of you?
Yeah, and that's really part of why I joined the Forward Party, is because our goal as Forward is sit down together and use facts and data. Don't use rhetoric, don't just use opinion, don't use something that you saw on the news or on social media. And I've always been a fan of that, and I meet now with liberal friends and conservatives, same within education, doing both. But the first thing I usually say when somebody says something that I disagree with is, tell me why you feel that way. Tell me what the story is, because it's natural to go, they're just, you know, those radical people, they don't know what they're talking about. But I have found that when you sit down and talk with someone, they usually have a story. And it's usually like, well, this happened with my child in school, or this is what I experienced, whether it's bullying, or I graduated not knowing how to read and write, whatever the situation is. And I'm a big fan of the Venn diagrams. You know, let's make our Venn diagram and find out what our similarities are, what our differences are. Start off with our similarities and work on that, and then from there we can find common ground. But especially in education, I'm a big believer in finding common ground. I don't think we need to be fighting over this stuff. And even the people who are the most passionate and get the most angry about things, I find that if you sit and talk with them, you go out to lunch, you know, go get a cup of coffee and sit and talk about it, 9 times out of 10, you find common ground and you can work with them.
I agree with her 100%. I think we have to have dialogue. I think we have to break bread together. You know what I mean? I think we have to spend time together. I think we, as a board, need to get away together. I think we need to figure out how we can work together. We all signed up to do what's best for the kids in the state of Utah. And so I think it's important that we are able to put some of our differences aside and make sure that we're making those decisions, doing what's best what our constituents voted us in to do, and what's best for those students. So I think that's super important.
Okay, you are in charge of the funding, I mean, you get the money, and then you're in charge of dishing it out or assigning it to wherever it goes. What is your feeling about being sure that all disabled or disadvantaged children are getting the services that they need and the money that they need?
That's me. It's big. I think, is it me?
No, it is.
It is me, okay. You know, I don't know all the ins and outs of the federal funding that comes down for disabled in the state of Utah. I know that we have an $8.4 billion budget here in the state of Utah. And I think it's important that we make sure we have a lot of kids. We have a lot of kids, and sometimes it doesn't seem like that money stretches as far as it needs to go, but I think that we need to do our best to make sure that we serve the needs of every student here in our state, especially those that are, that are handicapped or that might need a little extra. So I think we just that's one of those things we sit down and we have those conversations and make sure that those needs are being met. And I think for the most part they are here in our state. Of course we could always do better, but like I said, I don't know how much federal funding comes in to help with that too as well. So.
Yeah, I would agree with him on that. We have such great special ed programs in our schools, and I've seen them expand, and I've seen our special ed teachers. I have to give huge props to those people because they do wonderful jobs with their kids. But again, I think it also comes down to talking to your local LEA, talking to your schools, and if there's a problem, they're going to let you know. They're going to say, hey, we were promised X amount of dollars and we didn't get it. So it's important to keep that communication open and to make sure you're talking to them, that they're getting what they need, and if not, that they feel comfortable. I don't want any controversy there. I don't want any conflict there where they feel like they can't talk to you. I want open communication. And if there's a problem, I want them to feel like, hey, email Laura, shoot her a text, shoot her an email, call her, and that money that we were promised for some reason maybe didn't show up or whatever, she'll take care of it. So I want our local people to know that they can count on us. That there's communication there.
And you're right, there's limited funds. Some of the disadvantaged kids aren't given the opportunity to be able to play football, or they aren't because they don't have the money available to them. What kind of ideas can we have to try to get those people involved in those activities that keeps them off the streets?
You're specifically referring to disabled, or are we
disadvantaged? Low income, kids whose parents can't afford to put them in football, because it's expensive. And kids who can't be a cheerleader because they can't have enough money to buy the outfits. What kind of things can you suggest from the state level to help those children?
Well, I mean, since so many of those programs are usually available through the schools, it's again making sure that the schools are getting that funding and that all of those, and there needs to be an equal per pupil spending on that kind of thing from one school to the next, from one district to the next. So it shouldn't be a situation where, well, we live in Park Cities, we have all these programs, but these people live in, in some other area that's disadvantaged, they don't get it. It's making sure that the money is evenly distributed and that every child has, and that every school is able to provide. If you can provide those programs at every school evenly, and I know you get out to rural areas and you get out to, closer to the southeast part of the state, and it's easy to kind of, or, eastern and central parts of the state, and you kind of forget, but there's schools there and there's kids there, and there's opportunities. But yeah, we would have to stay on top of that for sure and make sure that the per pupil spending is the same for curriculum, for teachers, for athletics, across the board.
I know there's some programs out there that are available that are not there. They're nonprofit programs that step in and help. I think just making sure that we know who those people are and how to make sure the kids have access to those things is very important. Because through those programs, the community can get involved, right? By giving and contributing if people know that there's a need, they're gonna wanna, step in and get involved, but a lot of times people don't know there's a need. So, as you said that tonight, maybe there's people in this room that don't know there's some kids that can't play sports because they don't have the money to do that, and it's a real thing. So, I think, and that's what I'm hoping to do. I don't wanna just sit around a table at the state school board. I wanna be involved in communities and make these types of things happen, work on financial aid, all those different things in communities, to help kids. I think you have to work from home out, and so I think that's really, really important. So I think working with nonprofits and making sure that people know that those funds are available and plugging them into the right place will be key.
According to a study that we're doing, the league is doing, weighted pupil unit is $4,400 per student. How can we justify $8,000 for some, but only $4,400 for others?
I'm not sure if that's.
I'm not gonna, don't quote me.
Okay.
Through what we were figuring out, that's what it ended up to be. But if it isn't equal, what do we do about that?
So, so as far as I know, as far as I know, it is equal, and maybe even some funds come down for a kid that's in public school that they would have a little bit more there for them. So, from everything that I've looked at and researched, and I should have done a better job before I came here, I'm pretty sure that it is equal, and maybe even a little bit more for kids in public school than those that would go off to maybe a private school or something like that, or a home fund. I don't know what the exact numbers are. Is that right, Jenny? Was I right about that? Okay. Sorry.
If you're right about 8 billion, I just looked up how many students there are. There's 607,000. That's $13,179.57 per kid.
I don't know whether in that.
No,
So where's it
a lot of
going?
that's
Well, teacher salary.
yeah, it's
not going to the-
buildings and stuff like that.
Some's capital money, some's teacher salary, some's principal salary. They may get that much, but per pupil is a certain set amount.
Forgot the way the pupil unit is, but
It changes all the time.
Oh, okay. Yes, I believe, I know there's different levels of spending. The 8,000 from what I know, and again, I know it changes from year to year, but the 4,400, give or take, is, from what I've been told, is based on teacher salary, things like teacher salary, curriculum, providing technology in the classroom. But then above and beyond that, you get into facilities, building facilities, facilities management, and then one of the two big costs that I know were not even dealt with in charter, when I was in charter school, were athletics and transportation. And that's a huge chunk of money, and that's where, like you said, that pushes that over the 8,000 when you get into transporting kids, because charter schools provide their own transportation, and they don't have the big football fields and all the insurance that goes along with that. So, but if you include all of that together, it comes out to, last number I heard was over 8,000, and they felt like 8,000 was a good number, because you're assuming, you're assuming the private schools and homeschoolers aren't necessarily going to have the big football teams and the buses and all, and that kind of thing. So 8,000 compared to national spending, I know national spending on average is over 10,000 per student. So they were trying to kind of aim a little bit lower than the national average. This is
4 zillion children. But we do really well for that 4 zillion children.
Yeah.
Amendment B on the ballot, how do you feel about that amendment?
I believe that's increasing our spending from 4% to 5%, which I'm always for increasing. I know Amendment A is now dead, and Amendment D is now dead, so we're focused on B and C. I'm always for increasing the amount that we're spending, as long as it's going to the right place. I want to make sure it's going to our teachers, it's going to technology, it's going to things like suicide and bullying prevention. But I personally will be voting yes for Amendment B.
Utah's growing, and we're having more kids, and more kids are coming to the state, so I definitely think that our spending needs to go up when it comes to education.
So I know Amendment A is dead, but how do you feel about taking part of that income tax and those taxes that they use currently to educate our students away? I know Amendment A is dead, but it will rear its ugly head.
I know it's a super controversial thing, and a lot of people, there's a lot of legislators that are for it, some that are against it. But like I said, Utah's growing, and I don't think you can mess around with the budget when it comes to our school system. I think we need to keep it firm and where it's at. People need to know what there is to spend, not have to wonder from year to year what's gonna happen, how it's gonna fluctuate.
I personally was not a fan of Amendment 8, partially because it just seemed very confusing. And it seemed like there weren't a lot of specifics when you got above a certain threshold on what they could spend. I know they talked about anything extra we could spend on roads and law enforcement, but there was nothing in there to prevent them from giving, legislators pay raise, or it felt a little vague. So I'm personally glad that it's gone, because I felt like in the long run it could hurt our education system. Maybe not, but if it was good for the education system, it should have been a little more clear in the way that it explained that.
This is another controversial. What are your feelings about the teaching, I don't want to say sex ed, but the teaching reproductive choices, et cetera, in school, in our schools?
90 seconds. I know that in having 6th grade students, we did maturation every year, and I thought that was wonderful. And I know the parents were thrilled that we were doing that, because there were things talked about in there that the kids didn't want to hear from mom and dad. My girls, I have 2 daughters that are in their 20s with the Utah schools, and they said there was some frustration over not going into enough detail and showing and talking about all the options when it comes to reproduction and sex education in schools. And by the time they graduated, I asked them, what do you feel like you learned? I asked them about a lot of subjects, and they said, not much. I wasn't really impressed, and I feel like we could do a better job. I am a fan of teaching all the options to kids. I am a fan of talking and having open, honest conversations, and I'm also a fan of having the parents in the room when it happens. Bring the parents in and let them talk about it. It's awkward. It's weird. That's okay. But when
I down with our local school district, and they just asked me, what are people saying? And I talked about that, parental involvement, parental engagement, want more transparency. So guess what? In the board briefs, that's all I'm seeing. We need parents involved, we need parents plugged. And so I would challenge them to do that. And then teachers are sending out emails, and they're letting parents know we need your involvement. And I would say maybe lean more into the hows. This is how you can get involved. This is how you can participate. And this is how you can, if your schedule's busy, this is how you can, just different ways for parents to get plugged in and involved. And I think that the more, we may not see all of them, right? But if you saw a third of parents get involved, it would make a drastic change what's happening in the school. Stability it would bring accountability, all the things that we want. It would happen if we could just get parents to come out and get plugged in and get involved. So I think messaging, just like a commercial, right? You're trying to appeal to people. I think the messaging has to come from the school districts. Hey, we need you. And my challenge is when parents step back in, we don't step back in and be nitpicky, but we step back in with the spirit that says, how can I serve and how can I help? And if we'll do that, it'll be amazing. It'll be amazing.
Excuse me, I'd like to interrupt for a minute. The person who's recording this, is your battery in good shape at the moment? Would you check it? Sorry.
My battery's fine.
It's fine. Okay, thank you.
The tripod is going dead.
This phone.
Okay, we just got reported. Is the phone dying?
Yes.
The phone's
The
dead.
tripod.
The tripod.
Oh, okay.
The tripod.
Is it dead now?
No, it just says low battery.
Okay, well, that's wonderful.
Whoever.
Well, we're gonna have to wrap that up, aren't we? Okay, Laura, sorry, you didn't get an answer.
Okay, yeah, as far as parent engagement goes, to me, there's really 2 things that I did as a teacher that was more effective, I feel like. Number 1 is the communication with the parents, and you can do newsletters and you can put things on your Canvas account, your email and stuff, but and it's hard when you have a lot of kids, but the personal emails, when you get the phone numbers, you get the text message, and you're able to call home, that communication is extra work. But and sometimes I would have parents whose job it was, hey, can you call 10 parents, and can you call 10 parents? And there's a difference between getting an email and getting a phone call. And when somebody calls and says, hey, there's a field trip next week, and we could use you for just 2 hours. And it's amazing how, you go from having 2 volunteers to having 12 volunteers. So I think that's the first part, is making sure you have that one-on-one, that good relationship with the parents. And the second thing is giving options. There's what I call low, medium, and high involvement. Low involvement, can you come once a month and do this? Medium involvement, can you come once a week and do this? High involvement was, can you come daily? And these are the options. And when parents look at that and say, oh, I can do that, but I can't do this, instead of a yes, no, can you help, yes or no, it's here's different ways you can help, and it allows them options and lets them pick a way they can choose a way they can help. So keep it simple. It's like politics or anything else. People are busy. Keep it simple. Keep the line of communications open, and it's much more effective that way.
I think you kind of addressed this, but how did you feel? Last year they changed this to a partisan position. How do you feel about that being put in place on the school board?
Not great. I don't like education being partisan. There's a lot of things going on in our nation nowadays that have just become divisive, and it's ridiculous. And like I said, I've had friends who talk about certain things. Like I have friends in education who are Democrats, and they say, I'm liberal with this, I vote Democrat with that. But enforce school choice, don't tell my friends, don't tell my family, they'll get mad at me a little bit. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. So I'm not a fan of it, and again, that's why I'm a forwardist, because I don't want this to be, I don't want somebody to look at me and say, oh, you're a Democrat, you must believe this, you're a Republican, you must believe that. I want them to say, you're a forwardist, I need to dig a little deeper and find out who you are and talk to you. I want you to have a conversation with me and get to know my ideas, and I want to know your ideas. And at the end of the day, we all have kids that we love. We're all taxpayers, and we're concerned about where our money is going. It shouldn't be a left or right issue. It should be about what's going to strengthen our schools, what's going to be best for teachers, what's going to be best for our kids.
I agree with her. I don't think you should ever vote for somebody just because they're a Republican or a Democrat, whatever they might be. You got to take the time to find out what their morals are, what they believe in, what they stand for. And so I would hope and pray, even though this is partisan now, that people would still dive in and find out what people stand with and what their values are, and find out who the person really is.
And I encourage you to do that through Vote 411. You can go in and take a look at different parties and understand what's going on from that candidate. The other good place to go is their website. Google them, pull it up, and look at it, you can see a lot. Okay, that's the end of that. So now we have 2 minutes to tell us how wonderful you are. Who started that? Mark, so the chief.
Okay. Well, my slogan is together we stand stronger for Utah. And I believe that everything we talked about, and this is not some pie in the sky. I believe that we can have the top education system in the entire country. I believe that. I believe that we can see great changes and great strides forward here in the state of Utah like we've never seen before. I believe that. But I believe it'll happen together. I think there's so many things that are there trying to divide us in different categories and different parties. We have to come together to be able to see these things happen. So I believe that together we can create a culture that is supportive and empowering for parents, that is supportive and encouraging for teachers, and that is safe, we talked about that already, and successful and rich in academic excellence for students. And so I want to encourage you as we head into this November election, November 5th, if anything that was said resonates with you, vote Rod Hall for State School Board District 3.
Yeah, I'm excited. First of all, I have to point out, my lovely husband is sitting right back here. He's in the blue shirt. And I didn't acknowledge him in the beginning, but I'm really grateful to him for his support and for all the volunteers and wonderful people who have helped with my campaign. And I think Carl's right in the fact that we should be, right now we rank 13th in the nation in overall quality of education. That includes teacher retention and scores. But I would like to see Utah be number 1, and I think we can do that. I actually was speaking to an administrator in Minnesota last month, and he said, we're really excited about some of these states that are making changes. We're a little nervous about vouchers. We don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but boy, if you can make it work. There's a lot of pressure. The world is watching those states, or the nation is watching the states that have vouchers, and if it fails, none of us are gonna have more schools with, you know, the extra options and choice that these states have. So there's a little pressure on Utah. There's pressure on us to succeed and to make this work. And like I said, I'm always for more options. I mean, I'm a third-party candidate, so obviously I'm for more options. And I feel the same way about education. I want kids to have more options and teachers, but we gotta hold people accountable, and we have to make sure it works. We have to make sure it succeeds. And then going back to the partisanship, our slogan for the Forward Party is not left, not right, forward, which I love. I mean, that kind of is what sold me on the Forward Party. And I'm excited about the possibility and about the changes that are coming. I'm excited to know that I have made a difference in the classroom on a small scale, and now I have the opportunity to make changes and improvements in Utah schools on statewide, and to me that's really exciting. And I would ask you to vote for me, and once I get in office, contact me, let me be in contact with you, and I want to work together to bring positive changes to our schools.
Thank you both for coming. I've voted quite a bit myself. And thank you guys for coming. We'll have a local school board election in probably about 20 minutes. They're here. There was one question asked about training. You need to ask them, because that was really targeted, but you can target to them. So don't be afraid to, ask them questions on how they feel. Thank you again for coming. Pick up any cards or anything that you need over there to get people registered or to learn about the candidates. Thanks.
I